Welcome.
Now.
I'm trying to tell y'all this, but I know you guys are tired. Y'all want to go home, right?
People and music on EnergyGroove.
You're on People in Music on EnergyGroove Radio, and today we're joined by our very special guest, Virginia Reid, who is a producer and an engineer for ABC Classics here in Sydney. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much, Brad. It's lovely to be here.
Now, let's start out by talking a bit about your role as producer and engineer at ABC Classics. I imagine quite a lot of people who aren't so familiar with the behind-the-scenes work of the music industry, they'd probably be a bit curious as to what a engineer does.
Sure. It certainly is quite a different process for your traditional pop rock stuff, recording. And also I'm sort of a little different in that I can wear both hats of producer and engineer, but producer in classical music means something quite different in that really I'm reading the score. I have the music there in front of me and I'm sort of running the recording session in as much as the musicians play, and I read along the score and I'll take notes and I'll say, okay, we need to do this bit again, please, because you got that note wrong, or you're a bit out of tune here, and
wow.
or I don't like what you did. You have to do it again. Exactly. So at a recording session, I begin more with the engineer's hat on. Okay. You know, we'll work at getting the right sound and get all of those things happening. And essentially, it depends on the recording project itself. Like things, if it's just a piano CD or a CD of sort of similar kind of music. Like, for instance, last week I recorded the strings of the Sydney Symphony, so all the violins and cellos and everything, and a solo saxophone player. So with that, we spent a bit of time doing a sound check right at the beginning of the recording session. But essentially, once that was set, I don't really have to worry about it too much because it's all essentially, exactly. So once we've got all of that sorted out, I then just start focusing on the performance side, and I'm reading the score and making sure that they're playing the right notes.
Quality control.
Kind of.
Motivation.
Yes, exactly. When the musicians start running out of steam and they still haven't got it right and they're starting to get a bit frustrated, you have to sort of...
I suppose that's probably one of the many skills that you need to have as well is coaching.
So much. Yes. Yeah. You have to do understand what it is to be a musician and what it's like to be on the other side of the glass and having to play. And sometimes you do have to come up with new ways of just calming the musicians down. It's like, and for, crazy sort of practical issues, if you do have a whole orchestra in, you've got 30, 40, 50 people in, you don't just sort of start when you feel like it and go until you're finished, or, you start at a very particular time and you finish bang on time. And there's always someone in the orchestra who will, get up and leave the minute you reach the end of the call, and you've got to give them a tea break at the right time. So there's a lot of pressure to sort of make sure that that you've got everything that you really need to then go away and edit together.
Sounds like
a really good performance.
A lot of synergy that needs to happen.
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
How long generally, if like you mentioned that you record whole CDs, whole albums of music, how long would that take for you generally?
It sort of depends on, again, what the music is, what the musicians are. Like, for instance, a piano CD that's just come out with Simon Tedeschi took us basically 3 days to record, and 3 pretty short days because he really knew what he was doing. Obviously, and it was
skill
easy.
Level of the musician
counts. Sometimes you just are not given very much time. So last week I had 2 days with the Sydney Symphony, and we had to record sort of about 30 minutes worth of music, and that's really a very short period of time to do that much music, where really they're seeing it for the first time themselves as well, or, you know, they've never performed it before, and so they're having to sort of learn it as well as record it, and so that's pretty stressful. And then other times you'll have a whole week to do something, which can be relaxing as well. But but it can also be bad in that, you know, if they think they've got loads of time, musicians
Get a bit relaxed.
you know, you still need the adrenaline to make a good performance. So sometimes having limited time can be a good thing. It keeps them.
So I guess time management would be something that you need to have as well.
Yeah,
in that sense.
Absolutely, yes.
Tell us a little bit about your everyday work. So from 9 a.m. you get in. When do you know things are coming up? Like, you know which musician's coming in when? How does that work?
Yeah, I have very little say in terms of what gets recorded and what music, and those kind of decisions are left up to sort of my colleagues in ABC Classics, which is about, you know, I've got about 3 colleagues in ABC.
Small team.
We're a very small team.
Very hard-working team, though, I imagine.
So, and again, something can just pop up. You know, next month we're doing a series of concerts. This might make a good CD. Would you like to record it? And we'll sort of jump in and go, yes. Other times, you know, there are some really terrific opera singers that I record, and sometimes you have to plan a recording, you know, 2 years to 3 years in advance.
Wow.
And you'll get, you know, 2 days to record something, and it'll have been locked in 2 years previously.
2 years. Wow.
And so you really have to make sure that you don't get sick the day before. You know, it's like, you've got to, you know, I've had to,
Gotta bring on your A game.
That's it. That's it.
Wow.
So often my year is sort of is mapped out reasonably in terms of recordings.
Okay.
Like, I'll know, you know, in 6 months' time, I've got 3 days where I'm doing this CD, and then, you know, a week later it's something else. So I can sort of know a year in advance, sometimes even, you know, a year and a half in advance, kind of what's happening in terms of recordings. But I don't necessarily do many. It's like I might do one every 6 weeks almost. But then there is a lot of post-production as well. And so, you know, 2 or 3 days in the studio can turn into 2 or 3 weeks of post-production.
You're listening to People in Music on EnergyGroove Radio. Today we're chatting to Virginia Reid, who is an ARIA award-winning sound engineer for ABC Classics. Stick around, there is a lot more to come. Now, what would be generally happening with post-production once recording's finished?
It begins with editing, and it's the editing that can take a long time. You tend to record as many takes, lots of takes, as many as you can. I'll get musicians to, you know, I will use all the time that I have, and I've got a bit of a reputation of really pushing musicians quite hard as well, or not pushing them hard, but I will keep making them play while they're playing really well. And if I'm hearing that there's still each take, you will get you will hear more stuff happening, interesting playing and an interesting interpretation of the music. And, you know, you can gauge when they're still bringing new stuff to each take. And while there is still good things happening, I'll keep asking for more and you know, but without sometimes I'll have to gauge it, because it's like you can get a bit obsessed on the first, couple of pages of a piece of music and forget that you've got another 30 or something to do. So you can't, you've got to pace yourself. But I will always sort of push musicians to keep performing while they're still sounding good. I'll keep getting them to play. So I can end up at the end of a recording session with a lot of material. And then my goal is to edit it together in such a way that it's all technically correct. And, classical musicians can be very concerned about things like
aspects,
exactly, yes, and tuning, as especially string instruments or singers, or very really have to have it all in tune. But then you've also got to make it sound interesting. You can, I've been involved in CDs in the past where the musicians will become so obsessed with just the tuning of stuff that they'll ruin the performance.
Okay.
It's like it'll end up just sounding bland and boring and uninteresting. Whereas what I'm trying to do when I'm editing is make them sound really, really good from a technical perspective, but also thinking about, the person listening on the other end and making sure that, they're hearing a really wonderful performance that's engaging and drawing them in, and hopefully, if it's a piece of music they've not heard before, make them go, wow, this is a fabulous piece of music. Or if they do know it well, they go, oh yes, this is a really fine interpretation of this classic. So if someone's going to go to the trouble of buying a CD and listening to it, you want them to be hearing the absolute best that we can do. So the editing side is a very creative part of the whole recording side. And then these days there's a lot of mixing involved, which wasn't always the case with classical music. The tradition has always been to mix it live, which is sort of makes things easy in some respects. It cuts down the post-production time, but it makes the recording process a bit stressful as well if you're having to mix live.
I guess that's another thing you have to think about while it's happening.
That's it. And but now that multi-tracking has become such an easy thing, and and also if I'm having to go to a concert hall or to some other church or whatever where you record, you can't take a whole big mixer off with you. It's like, I've tried. It's with the workstations we have, and that everything is so much more compact and, digital recording. It's made multi-track recording of classical music very practical and really great. And so I multi-track now, which means once I've edited it all, I've got to mix it as well, which is a new phase, which has also changed the way I can record. It makes things more. I can concentrate more on the performance at the recording session rather than having to mix it. And I think you end up with a much more interesting recording at the end of the day when you can really fine-tune the mix, which again traditionally wasn't really the case with classical music. You'd have to be a bit more conservative with the levels you'd set. That's the thing with orchestras. They can be really, really quiet and then really, really loud. And when you were mixing it live, you would really have to be careful.
Yeah, you'd have to count. And count for that.
Yes, yeah. So now, tracking it, it's a lot less stressful, and it allows you to sort of really mix something that's much more dynamic, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're listening to People in Music on EnergyGroove Radio. Today we're chatting to Virginia Reid, who is an ARIA award-winning sound engineer for ABC Classics. Stick around, there is a lot more to come. And tell us about I mean, obviously you've got to go from recording to editing to mixing. It's a multitude of skills there. Would you say they're standard skills that an engineer as yourself would need to have before getting into the workforce?
Yes, to a degree.
Degree?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Are there any specialist people that specialise perhaps in one area? Or
I think what's happening with classical music is that that people, engineers, producers are starting to sort of do all the roles. I mean, sometimes they don't necessarily have to do all of them all the time. I know, I mean, for me, I'm doing it for a practical reason that ABC Classics can't really afford a producer and an engineer, and so it's very convenient that I can do both. And in many ways, I arrived at the ABC as an engineer about 14 years ago, and I became a producer out of sort of necessity and practicalities. I could edit together a recording, I could produce a recording, and I could engineer a recording, and I would do those separately. Whereas financial reasons and practical reasons kind of meant that I ended up doing them all. And now with all the technological developments, it's made it really practical and easy to sort of produce and engineer yourself. So,
it's probably worked out for the best for you.
Yes.
Then.
Yeah. And I mean, we were talking earlier, the terminology of tonmeister, that's what I was explaining, that technically that's kind of what I am, is a tonmeister. That's kind of what the definition is okay. Someone who is an engineer, but with all these sort of musical, artistic skills that go along with it as well. So you sort of know how to put up the microphones and make it all work, but you also know the artistic reasons behind why you would use a particular microphone and put it where it is.
I think that's probably really important to know, though, as well. If like to know both sides, things just kind of they're in context a bit more for you.
That's right.
You know how to, I don't know, utilise those skills appropriately, I suppose.
Yeah, and one sort of helps with the other. Knowing how to edit really helps you with producing a recording session, because someone, like a singer has to hit a really high note or something, and they can only do that once or twice before their voice is shot. And you'll have to be able to say, yep, I can edit that note in, or no, I'm not going to be able to make that work, and you've got to do it again. And so having all that editing skills then just helps you be able to sort of keep control of the recording session, and then you have to hope that you really can do what you promised.
Do you find that being an engineer, I guess in your example with ABC Classics, you mentioned that you started out more on the producing side of things.
Oh, more on the engineering side.
More on the engineering side, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Do you think that education is important as you go on, or do you find that it's one of those things that you kind of learn more as you just practically do things?
Well, certainly I know that I've learnt a lot while I've been on the job, but all the study that I did beforehand really helped me get there. And curiously now, in many ways, I've forgotten all my theory and technology. It's like I know why I do something, but I kind of forgotten the physics behind it. So it certainly gave me a really good grounding to get going, and it also helped me, having the good sort of education behind it helps you get into places where you can work and get experience with working. That really helps you get there, and you can phone people up and say, can I sit in on your recording session? And they're more likely to sort of be inclined to let you come along.
Yeah. And did you do that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. Yeah. So so then that gets you started. And so although I would say that, I sort of had a lot, by the time I started at the ABC, I had learnt a lot. What I've got now is a lot more experience and
I suppose working with a multitude of different artists and different musicians with different instruments, you have to kind of learn pretty quickly anyways to adjust to those sort of
That's it.
environments.
Yes. And I sort of, now, I'll look back and think sort of how stressed out, I suppose I'm less stressed now than I was. Like I would be really, which is not to say that I don't get quite nervous and tense before a big recording session. But now I'm kind of know what to expect. And in many ways it's those few days beforehand that are all for making sure that everything's in place and have you got everything, and you just want to start, whereas, it's like I'm ready to go. Let's do this. And yes, yeah. So
what does it feel like to work on a project for so long and then see it hit the shelves and hear feedback?
It's wonderful, and you never it's still just as exciting and wonderful today as it was when I saw the first review of a CD that I recorded. It's you still read them with just the same amount of excitement, and it's funny. I think that's the thing about all this is that you do work so hard, and you do sort of put you are putting so much of your soul into a recording. You do sit there, and by the time I've finished with a recording, I know absolutely every single note in it, and I've done that where I will sort of go into the area of the classical radio station at the ABC, and I'll hear something that I've done, but I don't necessarily know it. I won't go, oh yes, that's the Beethoven sonata, blah 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 that I did. It's like, I know this. I really know this. I know every nuance of the line or something. And it's like, who was this? Did I do this? It's like, so it becomes sort of physically part of you, the music that you've done. And that I think is what still keeps you going, because as we were talking before we started the interview, I work in the basement of the ABC. It's I have literally spent 14 years in a room not much bigger than this, and with and many hours. You'll go down after lunch and you'll come back upstairs and it's dark, or it suddenly started raining. You didn't even know. And what is keeping you going there day in, day out is that you do just really love the music, that you can't quite, you'll walk out just exhausted and completely fried, and you go, I can't do this.
Do you feel a personal attachment to most of the music that you record?
Absolutely. I think there's no... I don't know how to not become attached. It's like even, I've had people ask me, what if you're working on something and you really don't like the music, or, or you don't like the musician or something, and you sort of go, you think, well, you can always find something worthy in it, and it almost sort of your personal opinion of the music doesn't really matter. You will still put all your effort into making it as good as possible. It's like, it's your job here is to make this recording project work, and you'll do whatever it takes. And so, yes, you do get very attached. I think I've learned how to be a little more mature about it, because I've had this with sort of younger engineers who get really hurt when they've been involved in part of a recording and someone further down the chain to them will do something that they hate and they, you know, and they feel so heartbroken. You know, it's like, oh, my mix was so much better and now they've ruined it or something, you know. And you've got to just learn to sort of give those things up. But it doesn't stop you from getting as deeply involved in the process as you always can. So yes,
of course, it must be rewarding to at least see it on shelves.
Oh,
and
it is.
potentially on people's CD racks in their houses.
Absolutely.
And on the radio, as you mentioned as well.
No, that's right. I do remember when I first, because I studied in Canada and I worked in the States.
Yeah.
And I came back to Australia trying to get work, and it was hard going at first. And I would, to cheer myself up, go into the CD shops and go, I made that. You know, and it's like, I can do this. It's like, you know, and it is interesting that there is, although music is this ephemeral thing that sort of, it's not a physical thing at all, but there is something lovely about when the cover art is all done and it's
that's the tangible
produced.
bit. That's the actual
exactly
physical. It's real moment. I think
that's it, and it does. It is a culmination of everything that's gone into it, and you do go, there's a lot of me in this recording, and it is very satisfying, and it's strange that after all these years, it's just as satisfying as it was at the beginning. Yeah,
that's good to hear. And I guess it must be even more rewarding as you won an ARIA.
Yes.
For your engineering abilities. And you beat, some very noteworthy people behind Tame Impala and Empire of the Sun. So you
stunned.
Blew the top 40s out of the water.
They must be so cross.
I think they're kind of like, what's she doing?
Yeah, who is this person? Exactly.
Tell us about that. Tell us about, did you get notified that you were nominated? And
I knew I was nominated, that it was, yes, I mean, that was the stunning thing, is, to know that, and especially for the engineer, because I was also nominated for the producer.
Okay.
As well. And,
there you go, double
and it was like,
good year for you.
I know. I was like, yo, what? And so, I think I found out 2 weeks before the presentation of the awards, and yes, it was just extraordinary, and I mean, for years I had always. You always think, oh, I'd love one of those, but you don't. But I had always just assumed it would never happen, because that the classical music industry, or part of what is the little classical part of the bigger music industry, is so small, and especially the way it's got. We're such a small part of the ARIAs. It's like, they give our awards out, beforehand, and we're used to, and it's funny. It's like, it's funny how people get offended on our behalf. It's like, oh, why don't you get to go on the show, and why don't you get on the TV? And it's like, really, I'm fine. I'm happy. It's like, it's just nice to have it. Yeah. So, and for like the last 8 years or so, I've my albums have always won the Best Classical Award. So I've got about 7, I think, now.
That's amazing.
The album that the album that went on to win the Best Classical Album was something I had engineered and produced, and so I was always just so happy about that. You know, it's like, and it's sort of funny, and just sort of the last 2 years, sort of people have started to notice that that's what happened, that I've been making these CDs for sort of a long time, and to sort of be nominated was just an extraordinary sort of treat, honour. It's like, and, and I just, and I was asked, I was like, was I going to go to the sort of ceremony thing that was at the art gallery? And, and it's like, it's a really busy time of the year. It's sort of, I forget, it's, late October, which is just, there's just so much on at that time to sort of, it's like the last finishing touches to all the Christmas stuff is happening and you don't have time to.
But I guess that kind of says something about, why you got an award is because you're working so hard. I think if you are out partying, you wouldn't have gotten the award, to be honest.
I hope so. So
it pays off.
That's it. So it's funny. At first, I thought this is this is embarrassing. It's like they can't possibly give this. And then I thought, I have made a lot of CDs, and a lot of them have been really nice and have done well, and it sort of makes up for it's kind of, I don't see it as being for just one album. I see it for sort of being a whole collection of things that I've done, and it's so nice that that sort of my little area and my little sort of area of expertise sort of actually was recognised. It's like I didn't think that it would be considered. It was really, really nice.
That was good.
Yeah.
Very good. And I guess that's it's really interesting you mentioned that it's such a niche area. Do you think that, since you've won the ARIA, has there been a little bit more interest, or like are people a bit more kind of like, oh, yeah, let's have a look at what we're doing here?
Interestingly, it's the classical world that hasn't been that excited. It's like
really?
they're less excited. And I was like, you fools. It's like, this was not just about sort of, me winning an ARIA. It was like, it was an ARIA for classical music. It was like, it's like, it's like we're not just, it's not music for just sort of old people. It's not sort of what you listen to when you hit 50 and you slow down and you start listening to classic FM. It's like there's so much of this music that is really fabulous stuff, and it's nice to be passionate about it, and it's nice to be really excited about the music, and there's so much good stuff, and I thought that it would have been nice if they had a sort of seen it from that perspective, from
a different light.
But
why do you think there is that kind of point of view from their perspective? Are they just?
I think they. Look, to be honest,
is it a cultural thing? It's sort of in the classical music culture?
I think they're sort of struggling so much, in one sense, to sort of get any recognition. I mean, I suppose within just the world of the ABC, they're finding harder and harder for a little bit of recognition, and so they've it's probably made them all a bit grumpy. So but a lot of colleagues, sort of broader, like all the musicians that I've worked with, and sort of broader music groups were nicely excited.
Good.
It was like it was good, but the interest has been from outside of the classical world. That's where it's been exciting. That
is good. To hear, because that means that more people are going to be taking an interest.
That's it. And I would love that. I would love sort of. I mean, it's hard to keep these techniques going. It's interesting that the skills to record an orchestra are sort of, there are fewer and fewer people sort of with those, I'm finding, and it's nice that to sort of give that a bit of a boost and sort of recognise that they are skills on their own, that they are. I'm losing no train of thought.
You're listening to People in Music on EnergyGroove Radio. Stick around, there is a lot more to come. How would you differentiate recording for classical music over a contemporary genre?
Yeah. The thing about, I suppose the biggest issue or the thing that you've got to take into account immediately is that the classical music tends to be everyone in the room together playing together. That really so much of the sound is something that they're blending themselves and mixing themselves. It's like, and what you're doing really is recording the complete sound as opposed to a whole lot of individual instruments. You are recording the sound they're all making together in the room. So your mic techniques and the mics you use are quite different. I've got most of my mics are Omnis, which aren't really useful in the sort of contemporary music world.
No.
You use fewer mics, but you've got to be really careful about the choice of mics you use and where you put them, I suppose.
So it is a different ball game.
Yeah, very, very much so. And often you do really have to solve, but then I suppose this is also true in all music worlds, this thing of you've really got to get it right at the recording. You can't sort of just put mics out and make it work and rely on your abilities as a mixer to make it sound good further down the track. It really helps getting it right on the day, and that's what and classical music is about, making sure you have the right acoustic to begin with. I'm literally, when I leave here, I've got to go back to work and finish an album, which I have to have finished by Saturday of Gregorian chant, and that was a choir of about 12 men, and we went to a chapel in Glebe that has about a 6-7 second reverb time, and
wow.
That kind of music, that's the acoustic you've got to go to, and
it must be challenging. How do you source venues for such a niche sound?
You sort of get to know the places.
To know the sound, the places,
and the musicians also sort of know where they are. They're in Sydney. There are a few places. There aren't many, I must say.
Really?
And no.
So I'm from Hobart, so there's probably not many in Hobart in comparison.
No, but yeah. Oh, look, Federation Concert Hall is a beautiful place. Know it well. So as an example, that recording, I literally did use just a pair of Omnis, but I made sure. But we had to find. Curiously enough, I set the choir up in not the sort of a standard kind of churchy position.
Okay.
It's like, we actually reversed the room. Normally they'd, be up one end where the congregation would be able to see them, but they're actually, standing where the congregation would have their back to them. They're at the back of the church where it was a more concentrated sound, or you weren't getting all the crazy reflections off the curved back wall and things like that, which sort of does all sorts of weird things.
Sounds like you almost have to see the the music bouncing off walls.
That's it. So it was a case of, this is where you'd normally stand if you were performing this music in a church, but actually to make the recording work, I want you to go and stand over there. Okay. And
do you get some strange looks from musicians occasionally, or do they understand?
Sometimes, like those who've worked with me before,
they know what's going on.
They can trust me. And sometimes you've got to quickly gain the trust of musicians. It's like, I don't, and you'll sort of try to explain it to them, and then get them to listen to the results and go, see, this is going to work. And sometimes, there've been times where I've had to do it the way they want to do it and go, okay, see, it's not really sounding right. but let's do it this way, and that will work better. Often with recording music, it's and also acoustic music that's coming out into the room. People might sort of logically think, oh, this is the sensible way to go about it, and you go, actually, no, that's the complete opposite of what you want to do, and also understanding how instruments behave in a space. If someone's if a musician happens to be too loud, they'll think, oh, if I stand way over there, it'll be all right. And you go, no, you're going to be just as loud and you'll sound like you're in a bathroom. It's going to sound awful. It's like, we've got to solve this some other way. And so that's often what it is. You sort of will arrange the musicians where they're all sitting and where they're arranged is really the first part of doing a recording. You get them all set up, and also so they can see each other and hear each other, so they can play properly. Exactly. Yeah. If you separate them too much and they can't really see each other properly or hear each other, they're not going to be able to play well, and so your recording is going to sound bad. So you make sure that they're all happy and comfortable, and then you'll start miking it. And also what helps is that, if they're in a nice tight little bunch, that really helps with recording it as well. And musicians do tend to generally...
They like to bounce off their own energies, don't they?
Exactly. So
it's amazing how that stuff can come across in a recording too.
And that's exactly what you're wanting to get in a recording. If the musicians are enjoying the process of making music, they will be happy. And it's so
excellent. Well, it sounds like there's many facets that you need to actually be managing while you're doing your job.
Crazy. It's all the standard things of keep the musicians happy, and they'll play well, and your recording will sound good.
Now, you're here.
Simple.
You're here as part of the People in Music program, which is part of the Music Matters campaign. Music Matters is here to kind of reinforce the importance of music and just remind people that, music, you need to pay for it. Would people illegally be sourcing classical music? And
not as much.
No.
It's I'm sure it does happen. And we're not, the classical music world
I feel as though with classical music, people are so passionate about it. It's not so disposable in my mind.
The interesting thing is that because generally the music is longer or you don't have short songs, you tend not to. You sort of can, but often the music has a longer duration, but it still means that but that can create more complications in sort of just acquiring it. You can't with iTunes, it's very much built around downloading songs. So it does get really complicated downloading a piece of classical music where, it's like you want one movement, but because it's happens to be 15 minutes long, you're forced to buy the whole album or something. And I can imagine that would be frustrating, and the temptation to cut the corners would be there, and yes. But and it's interesting where we're heading. I think CD sales are still sort of really big for classical music. I think, although the digital downloading, that's increasing, it's still a very small part of our market. So we're still relying on CD sales. And yes, it's easy to sort of copy that, rip it, send it on. It's sad that, we're getting so used to listening to sort of poor quality copy or the audio quality is
It's just ripped from the
yes, exactly.
TV or the radio or something.
That's it. And, you know, I suppose that's the thing. We sort of make so much effort to get really good quality sound and to make it sound as good as possible and to give you as much of a live experience as possible. You're going to miss out on hearing just how great it can be if you've sort of ripped,
you've cut the corners,
something.
Yeah.
That's it. And there's sort of the funny image, or the sort of the image of the appalling record label that's just, you know, abusing musicians and just making huge piles of money at their expense. Just, it may once have been the case, but it's not anymore. You know,
No.
Record labels, well, sort of the sort of smaller independent ones, and ABC Classics. We are a very small outfit. We put out a lot of albums, and we're trying to sort of fill as many sort of all the categories of interest. We try to do that. So people looking at our catalogue or our output might think that we're this huge conglomeration or something, but really we're just 3 or 4 people. And so, you know.
Do you think that's a problem, that people don't, I guess, have a human face to these
Look,
labels?
I think so. I think if people, like, that's what's so lovely about this interview. It is, I think people would respond much more positively if they knew just what went on to make an album, that we've got a lot of, you know, there's
a lot of skill and a lot of talent that's being utilised, and so many man hours being put
That's
in.
it. and a lot of hard work. And I think, you know, we see every so often, you know, there's this impression of what it is like to make an album, that it's, that, you know, it is a lot of fun. I mean, I must say it's you know, it's fun, but it can be stressful as well. You know, like I was saying, you know, sometimes you'll have an artist who's only available for 2 days, and that's it for a couple of years, and you've really got to make it all work. And you know, there's a lot of pressure in those situations. And so yes, and so if you're buying the CD and listening to it, that there's all these things going on or that have gone into it, and
a lot of passion as well.
That's it.
I guess all you have to do is look at the liner notes and you'll see.
Well, that's it. Yes.
See all these names and. Yeah.
That's it. And there's a lot to be said sometimes about the music, and yeah, I think that's the thing. Music is, you know, we've got to keep appreciating that it is so important in our lives. And what is going to happen is that if we reach a point where recording of music is an unsustainable activity, then suddenly there'll be no new music being recorded, and then we might notice it.
Yes,
but you know, which I think will be a really sad thing. I mean, I think that's you know, there's still talk of you know, it's still important to get a music education in schools. Doesn't matter if you're not going to become a musician or you know, you're not even necessarily particularly good at music. It's still a wonderful thing to do and to have knowledge of. And I think that yeah, if we sort of have this broader idea that you know, it's just something that we should expect to have for free, we're sort of really disrespecting what music is and what it's always been, you know, and our entire history of the human race.
Exactly.
You know, if you want to start getting really,
pretty
you know,
boring
we've been
without
playing music for a hell of a long time, and we are reaching a point where we're sort of thinking, oh, it's just a commodity, and it doesn't, you know, and it's as superficial or as superfluous as sort of other things in our life, when really music has is such a sort of an important sustaining thing to what we are as humans. We've got to keep remembering that and keep remembering just how great, or, keep experiencing music for what it is, rather than just sort of, something to fill in the space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that sums it up nicely about the Music Matters campaign, I think.
Thank you.
All right,
Lovely.
well, thank you so much for your time, Virginia. It's
You're
been a pleasure
very
having
welcome.
you on the show.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you.
All right, and all the best with your latest project.
Thank you very much. Yes.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty.
You've been listening to People in Music on EnergyGroove Radio. A big thank you to Virginia Reid for chatting to us today. In case you've just tuned in, Virginia Reid is a sound engineer with ABC Classics, and she's also an ARIA Award winner. So too bad if you missed out. However, you can hear the interview on the Why Music Matters website. It's whymusicmatters.org if you want to recap anything about today's show. If you would like more information on ABC Classics, hit up their website. It's abc.net.au/classic. And of course, if you would like to get involved with the Music Matters campaign or simply learn more information, hit up their website. It's again whymusicmatters.org. My name's Brad. Thanks for joining me. I'll catch you next time. And until then, enjoy the music.